Hey guys, today we're talking about a concept that's going to come up in a podcast you'll be hearing soon, and it will arise very centrally to at least the talk I will be giving in that podcast. It's the problem of mind and body, or mind and matter. And I've titled this talk, Mind as the Crown of the Soul, the first installment in a three-part series regarding the mind. And we're going to start with the humanists, going all the way back to Marsilio Ficino, otherwise known as Father Ficino, as he was in fact a priest, theologian, and philosopher. He was one of the early Italian humanists. He lived in the town of Firenze, what we would call Florence. And in his essays, 5 Questions Concerning the Mind, he discussed the idea of mind overcoming matter, mind being the path down which one travels to get to the good. He was also a philosopher of the Neoplatonist school, so the good is something he would have assented to some degree. And that's where we get the idea that mind has a motion in his essays, 5 Questions Concerning the Mind. He talks how mind goes towards ends, towards fulfillments of ideas. And those ideas, for them to be harmonious, have to find their home in something that goes up to the highest ideal possible, what he might call wisdom. Another thing that he refers to as, quote, creating mind. In this, he has a sort of idealism of mind, that mind can really achieve these goals that it sets out to achieve. And if people actually use their mind appropriately, they can arrive at a common structure. And that idea of common structure probably sounds familiar from one of our former talks where we discussed rhetoric according to Aristotle. And logos, according to Aristotle, was exactly that, a common structure assented to between peoples. And according to Father Ficino, mind is what helps you arrive at that. And this common structure should determine behavior. You can hear echoes of Heraclitus in this as well, in that he bemoans the fact that people don't listen to this inner logos that is common to all. They just continue about their way, living and jumping to conclusions at the drop of a hat. So, Ficino is a product of his time. He's a product of the Renaissance. Renaissance means rebirth, and it's a re-emphasis on human values. The scholastic contrast isn't necessarily a denouncing of the human as such, but rather it looks at the cosmos and it sees the intense order, harmony, and beauty in that, almost like a reflection of the order, harmony, and beauty in the human soul, of which the mind is the crown. So in that sense, you see a nexus point between the humanist and scholastic views. But there is a change in the humanist view, which begins to show us the mind and body disparity. In this, the humanists valued the body. You can see, remember the beautiful statue of David, wherein David is shown as this vigorous, powerful youth, and his body is put on display as a work of art. Instead of listening to the music of the spheres, with the spheres rotating in perfect harmony, you can see the humanist listening to the music of the human soul and looking at the art on display in the human form. This truly highlights the mind and body disparity, as we will see, because the humanist is a collection of strange ideas. At once he assents to the religious tradition of the scholastics, he assents to many of the Aristotelian ideals, yet at the same time, he sees the body is not corrupted as the old scholastic might have seen it, but he sees it as unified and able to work in unison with the mind. And that's going to highlight this difficult problem between mind and matter, mind and body. According to Ficino, quote, wisdom sprung from the crown of the head of Jove, otherwise known as Jupiter, creator of all, warns her philosophical lovers that if they truly desire ever to gain possession of their beloved, they should always seek the highest summits of things, rather than the lowest places. For Pallas Athena, the divine offspring sent down from the high heavens, herself frequents the high citadels which she has established." Unquote. He's speaking of the highest goal, wisdom, or the good. And he also speaks of the only way to get there being mind. But we see another problem. The humanist has these contradictions. He at once assents to this classical tradition of wisdom, but also might cite St. Paul. I've underlined the big things that stick out in this passage. Will. Paul says, "Will is present within me." Nevertheless, how to perform, that's referring to the body. How to do, he does not find. The good that he would, he does not. Rather, he does the evil he would not do. Yet in his inner person, that being the mind, he delights in the law of God, that inward person, that mind. You can call this a Platonist's exegesis, if you will. And then he concludes with, "O wretched man that I am, who will deliver me from this body of death? So then, with the mind I serve the law of God, but with the flesh, that is the body, the law of sin." The humanist would not have denied St. Paul, but he also would have tried to unify mind and matter, mind and body. Nevertheless, he has this contradiction because it seems that St. Paul himself is delineating the mind and body problem that St. Paul is putting forward as theology, as didactic theology, that the mind and body problem is the way it is, that the disunity, the inharmonious nature of this life is the way it is. So the essential question is, if the mind and the body are not in concord, how does one discern logos? How do you do it? Because logos eventually leads, if Heraclitus is to be believed, to a common way of life, that everything would be better if everybody simply listened to this inner logos that everyone holds in common. Yet we know that the mind and body, from the humanist perspective, are at odds with one another. So then, we're at this quandary. How in the world can anything be held in common between peoples? Thank you for listening, and we will continue to discuss this in part 2.